Alistair is easily the main character of Dragon Age Origins aside from the player.
I simply came to deliver a message from the revered mother, Sir Mage. She desires your presence.
Why does he sound so suspicious?
To me. I am busy helping
What's
the Grey
wrong with
Wardens
him?
by...
We've taken a look at Zevran's character, and now it's Alistair's turn. So let us peel back his layers, look beyond the sass, and see what lies at the core of Alistair's character, and how his past has shaped the man that stands before us today. Just like Zevran's video, we are going in order of Alistair's life for the most part, not the order that it's revealed to the player. So overall spoilers for Dragon Age Origins, and also like mild mentions of early game Dragon Age Inquisition things, and also information learned through like books, I think. Just overall, like, Dragon Age spoilers, I guess.
Here I thought we were getting along so well. I was even going to name one of my children after you. The Grumpy One.
That's crazy.
I will speak to the woman if I must.
Who is this man?
Get out of my way, fool.
Alistair is the secret child of King Merrick. Everyone knew that he was a bastard son, but the exact details of his father were unknown by the general public, and even himself during his early childhood. Based on the Dragon Age wiki, his mother is a character we will meet in books and in Dragon Age Inquisition, but the long and short of it is that she is an elven mage who was also a Grey Warden. So being a warden is just kind of in his blood. Love that for him. But the version of the story that Alistair was told is that his mother was a servant woman who died in childbirth, leaving his upbringing to Arl Eamon, the kind soul who took him in. It is important to note that Arl Eamon is not the father, despite the rumors. It's unclear if Alistair ever thought Arl Eamon could be his biological father, but we do know that he learned the truth of his heritage when he was fairly young. It might actually be clear. I vaguely remember dialogue, but I couldn't track it back down, so I might just be misremembering something. Just throwing that out there. The rumors, however, did get to Isolde, Arl Eamon's wife. Someone who ideally should have been like a mother to Alistair instead saw him as a threat, taking out her insecurities on him. Alistair shares that she made sure Redcliffe Castle was not a home to him. He doesn't share any details, but it's pretty clear he did not feel welcome in what should have been his home. And he even shares a story about a time that he locked himself in a kennel and wasn't found until the next day. So, maybe I am misunderstanding what life is like in this environment. We do know that Alistair kind of lived the life of a servant boy and not exactly Arl Eamon's son. But I also feel like any good parent would notice when their child was missing much sooner than it seems Arl Eamon and Isolde did. We don't know exactly how old he was when this happened, but we do know he would have been pretty young because when he was around 10, Alistair was sent off to the Chantry. Isolde was able to convince Arl Eamon, and it's widely believed this choice was made because of her insecurities surrounding the rumors, since she was from Orlais. She had some, complex about Alistair being Arl Eamon's true Ferelden child once she became pregnant. So, there is that going on, but I feel like most of us are assuming that is why he was sent to the Chantry, just to get him out of the way, out of the picture. In the present, Alistair reflects on his childhood with a level of understanding and forgiveness. I think this speaks volumes to his character. It shows that he's extremely empathetic and able to see where other people are coming from, despite the ways they may have mistreated him. Sure, a lot of his understanding has come with age and distance from the situation, but the fact that he's able to be so empathetic in the first place is more than I think should be expected from someone who was mistreated as a child. It's widely accepted in the fan community that Alistair was likely abused as a child, at the very least, definitely neglected. Many of his childhood stories paint the picture of a child who may have been loved by one parent, but definitely resented by the other, with the mean parent winning, essentially. This is a fairly common trope, I think, in media, and in each case, these children are abused and mistreated and neglected and treated like subhuman. Alistair, at the very least, seemed to be treated like a person. Isolde doesn't seem like a particularly malicious person, but it does seem to me that she failed in being a parental figure. And Alistair even says he thinks that she felt threatened by him. Maybe she felt her own child would be mistreated or not given their full dues because Alistair would be the oldest and the one who was purely Ferelden, if the rumors were to be believed. This point in Alistair's background really highlights his big heart, seeing his forgiveness contrasted with the way that he was treated and thrown to the side. However, it's also the reason for his Templar background. Alistair is a warrior with the Templar specialization. Really great gameplay-wise, we really needed him. Alistair spent his teenage years in the Chantry. He says himself he absolutely hated it there, mirroring people who go to things like Catholic schools or church camps and have a miserable time, kids who are reluctant but forced into it because it's what their parents want. Also, it's the trope of the child being sent away to a boarding school so that they don't have to be dealt with. It's all overlapping there. He talks about how angry it made him to be sent away, sharing how he'd even destroyed the only thing he had of his mother's, an amulet with the symbol of Andraste. He talked about how Arl Eamon tried to maintain a relationship, coming to visit him in the Chantry, but Alistair was very bitter and very angry, and he blamed Arl Eamon for all of it. He says eventually the Arl stopped coming to visit, and that was that. In a way, it kind of is Arl Eamon's fault, but he is not solely to blame. So I get it. I think Alistair was justified in his anger. As a kid, being sent away like that would feel like a huge betrayal. It was against his will, and he knew it was only to get him out of the way. Like, he knew exactly what was going on here. It wasn't like some great kept secret. So that adds to the sense of betrayal, and it makes sense for him to be angry and for him to take it out on Arl Eamon. But the important thing here is that Alistair did grow past his anger and now thinks back fondly on Arl Eamon. He sees him as a kind soul who took him in and a man who was a positive influence in his life. His backstory kind of does more to tell us about his forgiving nature and his kind heart. It doesn't necessarily provide context for why Alistair may be the way that he is. Instead, it highlights his attributes and his ability to reflect. At the time of the game, Alistair is around 20 years old. Now, I don't know about you guys, but Alistair displays a level of emotional maturity that I did not have at his age. But life is short for a Grey Warden, so maybe that has helped give Alistair a little bit of perspective. His time growing up in the Chantry and being trained to be a Templar is not one that he has grown fond of with age, though. He was deemed unsuited for a life of religious devotion. I think this is a really interesting note because, to me, Alistair is the goodest of good boys, and you would think that an organization claiming to keep the peace for their Lord and Savior would want a goodest of good boys. However, Templars pretty much are a force for controlling mages. They often seem to mirror police forces, with what looks to me like a critique on police brutality and the use of police forces to oppress. Is that a very American perspective? I don't know, but it's what I got. Alistair does not seem like the kind of guy who would be willing to mistreat others just because they are born mages. He's even pretty chill with a player mage. However, it is worth mentioning that I'm pretty sure he was deemed unsuited for religious devotion due to his anger towards the situation, and according to Alistair himself, he behaved pretty terribly. So he was probably very unruly, not super cooperative, and just overall disobedient. But I do think it was a really interesting character choice to have this man who was trained to be a cop, more or less, from a young age, end up not aligning himself with that ideology, considering that even in Origins, at least when you play as a mage, it's made pretty clear that the Templars are not all they're cracked up to be. I also think it's worth noting that if Alistair does become king in your game and you import that world state to Inquisition, Alistair does try to help the rebel mages, kind of. His heart wants to help them, but once the Teventers get involved, he must put the safety of Ferelden as a whole above the rebel mages. This is kind of different from Honora, who just comes in like, fuck all y'all. Okay, that's not really. She doesn't actually say that, but she is notably more angry at how things turned out and regrets letting the rebel mages be. She's got a job to do, but Alistair does seem more heartbroken about how things have turned out than her. He's genuinely sad that things went down the way they did, but he has a country to run and protect. So he too must force them out to prevent Teventer from having an in to Ferelden and their politics. I don't know, that difference seems significant for the picture that I am trying to paint here in regards to Alistair and his, not being suited to be a Templar. Alistair sees people for who they are, and their intrinsic worth as a person, and is not interested in whatever power he could gain by participating in oppressing a class of people. Therefore, he is unfit to be a Templar. Unfit for a life of religious devotion. But there is also the idea that mirrors many real-life scenarios. A person who grows up with a religion crammed down their throat and grows to resent it or isn't actually suited for the religious life their parents wanted from them. People who eventually leave whatever religious establishment they were raised in, or at the very least, learn to make their own boundaries that better balance their beliefs and the things they want out of life. I think Alistair's character is also supposed to touch on this real-world experience as well. It's just some relatability thrown in there. He's got a lot of things going on. Let me rephrase that. He has a couple of things going on that can kind of be stand-ins for lots of different real-world experiences and parallels, and I think that's really interesting. He's a very multifaceted guy here. The pivotal point in Alistair's life comes when he meets Duncan, the realest of real men. Alistair believes that Duncan saw how unhappy he was at the monastery, and lucky for him, he hadn't taken his vows yet, and was able to walk away pretty freely when given the opportunity to join the Grey Wardens. It wasn't all positives, though. Alistair holds a lot of resentment for people and systems who try to dictate his life. He seeks to have control of his own fate, and becoming a Grey Warden isn't exactly the controlling your own fate freeing experience that one may hope. Instead, you find out after you join the Grey Wardens that it's essentially sealing your fate to an early death, pledging your life to the organization to fight Darkspawn. While being a Grey Warden provides a lot of freedoms to some depending on their background, it's also restrictive in its own ways. But ultimately, the choice to join was all Alistair's. Duncan saw a boy miserable with the cards life dealt him and offered to give him a new hand. Alistair did eventually grow fond of being a Grey Warden and found a sense of community and belonging with the others. A sense of belonging that was likely missing in his life, considering he was unwelcome at home, didn't fit in at the chantry in the monastery, and was just overall had nothing going for him that he really connected with. I believe the sense of belonging that he gains from the Grey Wardens and its camaraderie he's grown to appreciate is why he is so welcoming to the player. He sees the player as a potential new addition to his found family, and he knows what it's like to crave that sense of belonging, to need that connection, and or the ways that a found family can help a person grow and live their life. And let's be real, people don't just up and join the Grey Wardens if they are perfectly content in their own day-to-day lives. Sure, you have those two characters at the very beginning who seem to have things going for them as a way to make the player feel pity for them. But most of the origin backgrounds have the player coming from a place of being outcast, essentially. And Alistair, a fellow outcast, sees you, and he understands. One thing about Alistair, though, is despite all of the good things you can say about him and the strengths that he is a little unsure of himself. But when push comes to shove, Alistair pushes through and takes on his responsibilities with a sense of duty. We see this in the Battle of Ostagar when things don't go as planned, and the two of you end up having to clear the Darkspawn in the tower and light the beacon yourselves. What was supposed to be a simple and safe assignment turned into a battlefield in and of itself. And yet Alistair takes everything in strides, because he has to. And he does it. But Alistair isn't all business and doing what needs to be done. He takes any moment to be a sassy asshole because he seems like the kind of guy that just likes to be silly. Why'd you keep your birthright a secret?
You never asked?
It's fun for him, and it's fun for me to watch him be our sarcastic king. I wouldn't say he necessarily hides his negative emotions behind sarcasm, because when he's unhappy with something, it is very clear that his sarcasm is not lighthearted. He's just a guy who has layers of sarcasm to most things that he says, whether it be making a joke about himself, the situation, picking on someone else like Morrigan, or making his displeasure with the situation known in a way that is not inherently hostile. In that ways, he's very different from Zevran, who very clearly, uses humor as a mask. You could say Alistair masks behind his sarcasm. You could definitely say it. I would argue it's not entirely true. But I could see where he might have done that when he was growing out of his, angry phase, I guess. He's just, saying things. Using sarcasm because that's just what he does. I think that's just how he communicates, and I appreciate that, because I feel like sometimes I'm a person that, let me rephrase this. While I am a person that does use humor to kind of mask whatever, pain or whatever, the way Zevran does, I am also a person that is kind of sarcastic a lot because I think it's funny, and it comes from a very different place for me. So I might be taking that into Alistair's character, knowing that for me, it's different, and also Alistair uses his tone of voice very well. I don't know, I feel like it's pretty clear when he's complaining or when he's, genuinely upset about something.
So he needs 2 Grey Wardens standing up there holding the torch, just in case, right?
Throughout the game, Alistair is pretty steadfast in his morals. I believe if you put the companions on a morality spectrum, Alistair would probably be the farthest in the good. He knows what he stands for, and regardless of how the player plays, he remains true to his core values. His big character arc is learning to be more confident and more self-assured. There's no pushing him to be okay with doing evil things the way there would be in Baldur's Gate 3 with Gale, for example, if you were to play the evil route in that game. You cannot make characters evil in Dragon Age Origins, but the equivalent would be hardening them. Alistair's hardening literally just makes him more confident and selfish. He's not a terrible person because of this. He's not suddenly okay with killing hundreds of innocents. He's just a guy who has been pushed to maybe being a little bit more cruel, but ultimately looking out for himself to protect himself from the evil Grey Warden that the player is being. I have heard, though, that a hardened Alistair is more cruel in the event of dumping the player if the relationship has to end, but his cruelness seems to be more in how he interacts with people through, conversation, and not a change in the kinds of decisions that he approves of. And honestly, you get a hardened Alistair by being kind of a dick to him first when meeting his half-sister, not by pushing him along an evil playthrough. So, there's also that. Yeah, so let's talk about the half-sister thing. Alistair yearns for a connection, a familial connection. Alistair did not bond with his parental figures, and he didn't have siblings that he got to grow up with either. The closest thing he has had to an actual family is the Grey Wardens, but he still yearns to make a connection with anyone that he shares blood with. I think lots of cultures across the globe put a lot of importance on blood family, blood relation. It's a really big deal in a lot of cultures, and some people would argue that found family will never replace the sort of bond and connection you could create with a, like, blood-related family member. I don't know what I think about that. I think you can build strong bonds with anybody, but Alistair seems to, like, buy into this, like, blood relation thing being extra special. And in a way, yeah, it is. You can't just be blood related to anybody. So it is special in the sense that, like, that's an extra connection that you cannot just find out in the world. Unless you're, like, running into half-siblings in Denerim. We see in his Fade dream that Alistair is incredibly happy to spend a life just living with his sister and her family, enjoying their time together. It's a connection that he values deeply, even if he's not actually met his sister yet. And in a way, it's not exactly a connection that he values deeply, but it's the idea of the connection that he values, because there isn't a connection yet. Family is important to Alistair because he never got the chance to be in one. It's something that everyone puts up on a pedestal that he has missed out on. And he's got this romanticized version of his sister in his head because he is doing the young adult thing of assuming that because he feels a certain way about family, so does everyone else. I hope I'm not just projecting my own flaws at 20 onto this man, but that is definitely what he is doing here. Alistair is overjoyed and incredibly nervous about meeting Goldana, the woman he believes is his half-sister. They've never met, and he's not too sure what to expect. But with the help of the player, the gang is able to track her down in Denerim, and you can see a sibling reunion that Alistair has been dreaming of.
You killed Mother, you did, and I've had to scrape by all this time. That kind didn't last long, and when I went back, they ran me off.
Except Goldana is not pleased to see him. She holds a deep resentment for him because he had a seemingly more privileged life, and they'd all been told her mother died giving childbirth to him. And if you think about it, if they supposedly shared the same mother, maybe it is just a tad bit weird that Arl Aemon only took Alistair in and did nothing for Goldana. Especially if Goldana was essentially put out after her mother's death, doubly so as a child. I'm not saying it was his responsibility to do, but, like, I understand why she hates Alistair. Goldana was given hush money from the nobles, which did help, but it did not last long. I understand her anger and her resentment and just everything that she's feeling here, because, yeah, it is not fair. It's absolutely not fair how things played out. But, like, I don't know who would have been the responsible party to take care of. I mean, obviously the king was. That's his son. I don't think Goldana was also a bastard child of the king, but, look, I don't know. She had it rough, and now she's taking it out on Alistair, and it is a crushing blow to the boy. Alistair had expected to have a sweet family reunion, but instead was met with cruelty and indifference. She did not care about him, and in fact, believed his existence made her life much harder. In short, she hates him. This unexpected turn takes a great toll on Alistair. If he is not hardened, he's upset by it. But with some encouragement from the player, he bounces back, deciding to focus more on the Blight and the issues with Locane. But if the player chastises him for being too naive and passive, meeting him with indifference and cruelty as well, Alistair tries to make changes in his actions. He becomes more assertive and pragmatic and loses his idealism. Seeing the difference between being kind or tough to Alistair after this encounter makes it really interesting to me. Becoming more assertive and more selfish after being told off for how he handled meeting Goldana feels like a defense mechanism, not exactly character growth. If he's too passive, he'll just change and not have to go through something like that again. He'll show that lousy Grey Warden that he too can be assertive and stand up for himself. And while those are generally good things to strive for, I think the exact environment for which he strives for it kind of maybe makes it a little bit toxic for him. Who knows? I've not actually played this out myself. But considering that's his, like, hardened, and that's the equivalent of evil in this game. Okay, equivalent is not the right word, but it's, like, the closest thing you have in Dragon Age Origins to pushing your companions towards a darker path. And I think for other characters, it's a little bit more of a moral dilemma than with Alistair. That's just how good of a boy he is. But if Alistair is met with understanding, he is able to maintain his idealism and optimism, able to deal with the pain enough to box it away for later and bounce back. In my game, this was the version of Alistair that I had, and he never came off to me as someone who didn't stand up for himself. He always made his thoughts known, especially when he thought we were making a terrible choice. He cared about what others thought, sure, but he didn't let people walk all over him, at least in my opinion. Alistair, without being pushed to change, is soft. He's sentimental, reflective, understanding, perhaps a bit naive, but like again, he's 20 years old, and somewhat idealistic. And that's okay. He's young, and while this is a full-grown man, he still has a lot of life to live. Losing one's childlike whimsy and ideals isn't actually a sign of maturing. He's allowed to have some unrealistic ideas and goals. I think everyone does deep down, regardless of age. Things that they would love to work towards, even if they know it's possibly unobtainable. All things considered, it seems that Alistair does have a pretty good head on his shoulders. Sure, there's room for improvement, but he's young. It's to be expected. At 20 years old, I was not a fully realized, fully matured being. I was a young adult who made mistakes, who had a lot of maturing left to do. And I don't think that's exactly a character flaw that I need to grow from, but just a symptom of being young and still growing. So, I think that's where Alistair kind of sits. Alistair's future can go a few different ways. A pivotal point within the Origins games and Alistair's life comes when the gang makes it to Denerim and can finally confront Loghain in a more official stance. And you have some options. The player can choose to abandon Alistair and let Loghain live and become a Grey Warden. Why you would do this, I don't know. Sure, some fates are worse than death, but also, I don't like Loghain. I don't want him in my team. You can make him fight alongside those that he had once aimed to take down, joining ranks with those he despised and distrusted, and Alistair does not vibe with this. He would rather just, execute Loghain, let him get this all over with. And Alistair will not stick around if you take Loghain in, and eventually just becomes a bitter drunk with no future and no place and no belonging. Objectively, this is his worst ending. I think we can all agree on that. Stripped of everything that gave his life meaning, he just stumbles through. And that's it. I think you can see him at the bar in Dragon Age 2? ? I think. But if you don't take mercy on Loghain, Alistair will stick around, staying a Grey Warden, spending presumably the rest of his life fighting to save people. It's something that has given his life meaning, and the Grey Wardens as a whole is something that has given him belonging. It's not a bad fate, especially because it's one he'd already been signed up for. There's not a whole lot you can change about that. Even if you leave the Grey Wardens, I'm pretty sure you would still, have the whole, succumbing to the taint eventually. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Alistair can be encountered while fighting through Kirkwall, because he's with the Grey Wardens that are coming to help with the war at the end of Dragon Age 2. Alistair seems to be doing pretty well for himself in Dragon Age 2. He still has his purpose, his found family, and he's got somewhat of a leadership role within the Grey Wardens, at least that's what I made up in my brain, so I might have read the situation a little bit differently. But he's doing his thing, and that's the thing he signed up to do way back when, and I love that for him. However, Alistair does have another path that's not a future of fighting Darkspawn and directly saving people on a battlefield. Alistair can become king, either stepping up to his birthright or marrying a Nora, with the two of them leading together. So I did not take this path in my personal game because the player has to convince Alistair to be king, and I don't like feeling like I'm pushing characters to make choices they don't want to make. Alistair does not want to be king. He feels he's not fit to lead and would rather spend his life as he has already. He is not interested in claiming his birthright and all the responsibility that comes with it. He just wants to keep doing good as a Grey Warden. It's what he knows and it's what he's comfortable with. But after thinking about it, I do believe this is his insecurities. While the player may be the official leader of the gang in the game, Alistair was low-key the leader in my game. He's the one who gave us a direction to go in and seemed to know a little bit more about what was going on, and I do think he has all the hallmarkings of a great leader. His more passive characterization, while I don't think comes off as inherently insecure, does seem to stem from a lack of confidence, and being king takes confidence, pretty much. Alistair, without being pushed, does not have the confidence to want more out of life. He's content to stick to the status quo because he feels lucky to even have what he had. He could have easily been an orphan left to the streets, and he carries himself with a level of humility and grace that is reflective of the what-ifs in his life. What if Arl Eamon didn't step up and take care of him? What if he was just a poor orphan on the side of the streets that probably could have died? What if his life ended up differently? What if Duncan never made him a Grey Warden? He carries himself with this air of being grateful for what he has and almost being scared to ask for more because he's already has so much in his, just based on what could have been. And I think this is part of what holds him back from wanting to step up to his birthright, because who is he to want to suddenly be king and claim royalty when he's lucky to be alive? However, he can be convinced. Sometimes we all need a friend who pushes us to achieve more, to be more than we thought we were capable of. Alistair needs a hype man, and that can be the player. I do find it notable that he seems to be more receptive to becoming king if he is hardened, going down his more confident and selfish path. And having him hardened is the only way to remain in a romantic relationship with him as king, based on what the internet says, because I've not played that yet. It has an air of, the public be damned, no one can tell the king what to do. I think you literally tell him that to save your relationship. He keeps the player on as a mistress, or will marry them if you are playing as a human noble Origin, specifically the female, because he is only romanceable if you're playing as a woman. But if he is not hardened, he ends the relationship with the female warden no matter what, because he believes that the two of you would be unable to birth an heir due to the Grey Warden taint, which is a part of his duty as king. He puts his duty above all else because that's what he feels like he's supposed to do. If the player convinces him to step up and be king, he does his best. I think he has his heart in the right place, and that helps him be a good king. I think he would be a good king. But some of the public believe his heritage is a lie made up to overthrow Queen Enora, and the epilogue does say he has some trouble during his rule because of this. The public is not all entirely happy about how things went down. And you know what? That's understandable. Some random man just shows up and claims to be the bastard son of a previous king. How do you even know he's telling the truth? I get it. I trust him though. I don't know if I would still trust him if I was just a random citizen in Ferelden though. So it is what it is. However, if the player convinces Enora and Alistair to essentially co-rule, they reluctantly get married. It's a business move, not a move out of love. But Ferelden thrives under their rule. There's no issue with Enora being overthrown, and the people are pretty happy. And both Enora and Alistair can do their jobs in relative peace. I do think Enora has more experience, especially with the ruling, and just the game of politics. So this would make their co-ruling just, you know, better in general compared to what Alistair could do on his own, because he would have a little bit of a learning curve. He's got a great heart and the makings of a good leader, but Honora knows the game better than he does, and the two of them together, I feel like would make a really great team. So, maybe that's the better outcome for the people of Ferelden. Overall, I think Alistair is a pretty great guy who either learns to be more sure of himself, gaining the confidence to see his worth, or he grows stronger in his bonds with others, remaining selfless and humble. His character arc is a lot more subtle compared to Zevran, especially when you don't harden him, but maybe we can all learn to take a page out of Alistair's book and be both more empathetic and also more confident in ourselves. He's got something for everyone to learn from. I realized I started the script saying he's the main character, like that was going to be the thesis of this video. It's not. I just think he's basically the main character out of all of the companions in the game. While other characters do play a really big role, I feel like Alistair himself really drives the narrative of this game, and like he would be here either way. Without the player, he would be there. Because that's just, he was doing his job and got roped into this. And also, you know, the whole like being the king's son or whatever kind of makes him intrinsically tied to everything going on as well. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I love this man more than I ever thought I would. He's just my silly little guy, my blorbo if you would. But that is my Unpacking Alistair video. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all in whatever video I make next. You'll see you'll find out when I find out kind of vibe. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!